Hi all, let's have a look at Game 5 at the World Chess Championship 2018. Fabiano Caruana playing white against Magnus Carlsen. We have a repeat of e4, c5, we have knight f3, knight c6. So this is a repeat of earlier games. Now bishop b5, g6. And here a slight variance. Fabiano castles. In previous games he's captured on c6. So has he got anything up his sleeve here? Bishop g7 for Magnus, rook e1. e5. So this is quite a different path so far to earlier games. An alternative to e5, often seen as knight f6 here. For example, c3. This kind of position looks to give white just a small advantage. So it's played a bit like a very quiet Royal pairs. So anyway, after e5, we see a very interesting idea indeed here. Fabiano uncorks b4. And this does remind me, actually, there's a classic Fischer-Spassky game which actually been video annotated on this channel. If you want to check the title, Bobby Fischer's Sicilian Wing Gambit Dynamic Masterpiece, Game 11, 1992 match. So that's got this gambit, and if you want to see the game, it's in the pinned comment of the script. Of this game, if the pinned comment. It was actually from earlier though. Just to quickly show you, it was after castling. Fischer had played bishop takes c6 earlier, and there was b takes, and we had this position actually with the wing gambit b4, and actually it gave white quite a dangerous position. So Fischer as white got actually a nice advantage from the opening. Yeah, nice moves. Like this is a very dynamic, aggressive game. So just quickly check this out. And the exchange up, and was able to convert this eventually. Even though black's got the two dangerous pawns, they're knocked out there. So yeah, it can be a dangerous weapon of choice basically. And Fischer won there. So that was in 41 moves back in 1992. So anyway, it echoes a bit that. So b4, but not quite. Now we have actually knight takes b4 here for Magnus Carlsen. He has actually himself, Magnus has actually himself played c takes b4 before. After a3, Magnus has got a game back in Weekend Z 2005. Stellwagen, who was 2524, and Magnus was just 2553 at the time, went knight ge7, which proceeded like this, with Magnus actually playing on the king side, quite aggressive plan on the king side, and eventually white actually sacrificed the exchange there and got quite a bit of compensation for that, enough to eventually draw eventually in 52 moves. It was an interesting game to check out as well. So anyway, yeah, so that was with c takes b4, but on this occasion Magnus chooses knight takes b4. So Fabiano plays bishop b2 here, putting pressure on e5. Now the knight, the bishop is kicked with a6, and in fact white reacts with a3. If bishop e2, then the knight just goes back and black has a small edge, just holding that, reinforcing that e5 pawn. So we have a3, and now black played a takes b5. If the knight goes back here, then white just plays bishop takes c6 and bishop takes e5 with a small edge. Probably bishop takes is the strongest here. Knight takes e5 is even less of a small edge actually. It's pretty even here. Black's got a pretty dynamic position. So anyway, in the game, after a3, a takes b5, a takes b4, we have a couple of rooks coming off. d6 protecting e5. So now, I mean, if black had played c takes b4, it's a bit of a wreck here. And white just takes on e5 with at least an even position. That should be an even position. So d6, keeping the structure more intact. B takes, and now knight e7 is actually played, getting on with development. On d takes c5, again, the protection of e5 is released, so bishop takes e5. This position is basically just an even position. Nothing to write home about for either player. So knight e7 is played. We have queen e2 hitting b5. On c takes d6, this just is even actually. Just if d4 here, this isn't so scary at all for anyone. Again, it's kind of even position. So queen e2, we have b4, so indirectly protecting the pawn like that. There's no other. It's more dangerous to play queen a5 because c takes d6. This position is dangerous after knight c3. That protects the bishop, and it hits b5, and there's still a dangerous pawn on d6 sometimes. So for example, this, well, at least supports knight c7 as well. This is actually quite good for white, this position, to be avoided. So it's important to play something like b4 instead. Queen c4 is played. Queen b5 check just helps black a bit. Knight c6, this is just helping black a bit with an even position. So queen c4 is a bit more critical. And now actually we see queen a5, so supporting the pawn with the queen, and also hitting the bishop. And temporary pawn sack, c takes d6 there. We have actually bishop e6 now. There are actually some fascinating lines. If this was part of preparation, because this was played quickly, there is some very interesting stuff going on behind the scenes, which maybe is a bit science fiction-y. I'll just quickly show you some of that. If knight c6, d4, this position, just sacrificing the bishop, is interesting to consider. This could only be part of preparation. White is a piece down, but has a fantastically dynamic mass of pawns in this variation, and actually can claim an advantage. Now, if this was really prepared, it's pretty amazing bit of preparation, and can even get even more pawns. The top grandmasters do prepare with the likes of Stockfish 9, at least, even Leela maybe has been appearing in preparation nowadays. But yeah, this continuation would give white an advantage. So this is just a crazy line I've analysed, one of the craziest from all the World Championship matches, which could, in theory, yeah, that kind of line is absolutely crazy. So this is on, if we go back, so this position, d4, invites this bishop sacrifice. If we look at this just again for a moment, so mentioned d5, knight a7. Black could avoid all this if by actually just giving back the piece, though, just simply giving back the piece. This position is probably, in fact, safer for black. Black just ends up getting a small disadvantage. White has a small edge here, so it doesn't have to go in for that craziness. So anyway, it exists. This bishop sack is fascinating. I thought for a moment. So maybe Magnus, by playing bishop e6, might have bypassed this brilliant bishop sacrifice, and Fabiano could be thinking, "Oh man, I've done all this preparation and it just hasn't appeared." This amazingly dynamic bishop sacrifice. So anyway, bishop e6, we have queen c7. On queen e2, this position with queen takes a1, this position looks interesting enough to just check out for a moment. It ends up being basically an even position. Black's got enough for an even position here, technically. It could even just fizzle out as tactics. This is just a fictional line. But queen e2, yeah, queen takes a1 looks to be an even position. Just to check that out again here, if queen takes a6, that just hands black two connected passed pawns, and it would be a nightmare scenario. The two bishops, the two connected passed pawns, black's just got a big advantage there. So anyway, we see actually queen c7, so threatening mate in one with queen takes e7. That's actually taken. D takes knight c6, and now c3, which sometimes aims to construct a center if black's not careful. So if black really plays, for example, this, then that really invites d4, supported by the bishop on a1, with the threat of d5. So if takes, king d7. This is actually dangerous now, but the pawn is pinned to the bishop at the moment. But let's say bishop c3, so the knight is supporting the bishop there, so d5 is on the cards. This position is just going to be better for white. So that's quite dangerous to actually play b3 to invite d4, basically. That's really asking for trouble. The pawn is left there to be able to challenge white's centre, basically, with king d7. This is a fantastic move. It activates the rook rapidly to use that a file to hit the bishop, which is the loose piece in white's position. It's the only piece not protected by another piece. So much stronger than b3. So fantastic play from Magnus. I believe he seems to have bypassed preparation. Even if he ends up being a pawn down here, he's got great dynamic play now. Guaranteed. Now Fabiano plays c takes b4, and if d4, just to show this mechanism, d5 looks threatening, but here it's quite different. Actually, e takes, c takes, rook a8 hits the bishop, and the b4 pawn, you'll note, is stopping bishop c3. So, like in the previous variation, so if bishop b2 taking here, and the pawn's still pinned to b2, so there's no d5. So this is very, very different, and black should actually have a big advantage there. So there's no real point playing d4 here. So we actually have c takes b4, and now rook a8. So black's got the activity. Let's count the pawns. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So at the moment, 2 pawns down, 1 pawn down, but with dynamic compensation. So 1 pawn down here, dynamic play, and it looks good enough. And it's Fabiano that has to sort of work things out carefully now. So we have d3 being played. And now perhaps, interesting to consider is just b5, just locking down things and just celebrating the extra activity, and then maybe later hitting b4 with bishop f8 later. But we actually have an adventurous king with king b6 from Magnus. Now bishop d2 was played, which gives the possibilities of bishop e3 and of sometimes sacking this pawn, so it's quite dangerous for black. Rook d8, and also, yeah, this pawn looks extremely vulnerable, but there's dynamic things going on here. Interesting is the king walk, king b5. For example, knight c3 check takes, there's actually knight a4 tactically, because this is an unprotected piece to be celebrated. So for example, if king takes, then there's rook a1 check, winning that rook with an advantage. But even in this line, it's not so clear cut, because black after knight a4 check, can actually play king a3. This is just, well, after check bishop a2 here, king b3. This ends up in a peculiar situation. Actually, it just fizzles a bit, basically to an even position. So with that aggressive king walk, it's possible that it can fizzle like that in a remarkable way. So king b5, yeah, knight c3 check is interesting, but just to check this again, if say king f1 here, then this position is also just white has a small edge there. So anyway, black didn't play king b5 but rook d8, and then we have check, and now king b5, so slightly different circumstances. Knight c3 check, giving up b4, so pawns are now equal. We have knight d5. White is wanting to go a pawn down, it seems. Bishop takes, e takes. So white's at the moment the one a pawn down, so gone up from being a pawn up to a pawn down, getting his pawn back, but now again being potentially a pawn down after the knight protects f7 and hits the rook. Black is the one a pawn up now after all of that. So, yep. So let's see. So the king though, on with the rook being on c7, it's actually cutting off the king's escape. And if you have the king cut off, it's like the metaphor of the frog not being aware of the temperature changes. It can be boiled if not careful, if the frog doesn't hop out of the hot water, which is increasing in temperature. And here there are possibilities of actually mating the black king here on d3, because yeah, it hasn't got too many squares, and it has got e2, and that's about to be extinguished now with king f1. So we've got a lot of squares being extinguished to the king, and in fact, if black's not careful, this does end up being mate. For example, well, black played h5, which is very, very good. If, for example, h6, which you might think is logical to stop things like knight g5, g4 also takes away the king going like that to f5. So, for example, okay, that's a small edge for white, but say black is not aware of king safety issues here with bishop f6, then we have the remarkable knight e1 check, king e4, and now king e2, and you see, look, all of the king's squares are threatened, and in fact the threat is f3 checkmate. And if rook a5, which gives the king d5, then rook d7, again cutting off the king. So it's very important not to have your king too much cut off here. So the threat of checkmate would cause black to lose the exchange, have to lose the exchange and lose the game basically. Yeah, if bishop g7, then f3 checkmate. So there's some amusing stuff here with the king on d3 behind the scenes now after king f1. Yeah, you've got to be aware of this boiling the frog principle. If you start cutting off the opponent's king's squares, yeah, it's part of a sort of mating net basically construction process. So h5 actually stops this key move g4, which stops white taking away the squares too much of the black king. Now we have h3, king e4 is played. h4, that can be just taken. Bishop f6, that's still dangerous off the g4, and then this position actually should be okay with the king escaping to d5 though. So anyway, king e4 here, which offers a pawn back, so the pawn transactions are going backwards and forwards here. After check, the king goes back, offering f7, and Magnus accepts the simplification with knight takes f7 here. So basically offering in a way a draw by further simplification. If black wanted to keep some tension going, then knight e6. However, rook c6 should be quite nice for white. For example, here, this is an interesting position, which okay, no, it's technically an even position anyway. Just to look at this again, there's also the possibility of knight h6 check if white wants to have the bishop versus knight scenario, but again it's even, so there's nothing really to write home about here. After knight takes f7, knight takes, rook takes, bishop f6, g4. The game actually ended here, agreed a draw here. If it was carried on with, say, king e6, then rook a7, rook d6, king e2. This position, for example, it should be absolutely even. Okay, so yeah, another draw. I feel Magnus is heading towards the tie breaks, and he'll win in the tie breaks. That's my personal prediction, which I put on Corus, that I just thought all the games would be drawn, and then yeah, at the faster time control, Magnus will take his chances much more because his magnificent intuition for the game. He's very dominant on much faster time controls, and even bullet chess, of course. He's an absolute expert. So, you know, rapid, blitz, you know, whatever. Faster time controls, I think, is going to win this match at this moment. But let's see. We might have some decisive games, but I'm not so sure. If you enjoyed this analysis, then please click on the top left box to become a member at chessworld.net. You can play against other YouTubers. You can also check all the analysis in advance for these games and other analysis like Leela Chess from the improved menu, learn from the masters, and you click YouTube order. Okay, comments, questions, donations, see the description box for that. Likes, shares, subscribes with the notification bell, all really appreciated. Thanks very much.